So I have decided that introductions are for suckers. So we're just gonna dive in if that's cool.
Yeah, I don't wish anyone to know my name or anything about me, so I'm perfectly fine with that.
I know, right? I think so. I do have an agenda. I know we didn't go over it ahead of time, but top of the list, we have to do corrections, right?
For the first time ever because something was incorrect.
Something was like really badly incorrect last episode, and I don't know if you remember, but near the end of the episode, one of us made like a really dumb mistake. I feel like we should address it. So basically, in the last episode, you referred to the Parliament of Owls when actually the storyline in Batman is the Court of Owls, and I just want you to know that was a pretty boneheaded mistake, man.
Good call. And luckily, you know that I don't know enough about what the things are that you said to be able to correct you.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I feel like you should be pretty embarrassed because everybody knows. Well, okay. In your defense, I did look this up. So a group of owls actually is called a parliament of owls, not a court of owls. So I think
So
maybe you were just relying on actual, biological facts. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I hate to couch it in these terms, but I'm sorry that I only know reality and not
Yeah.
comic book shit.
So I do want to quiz you though. So
Okay,
a group of owls is called a parliament. What group of animals is called a court?
a court stenographers, I believe, right?
Bad joke.
I have no idea.
Jellyfish is actually a group of
It's
jellyfish is
called a
called a
court.
court. Yeah, a court of jellyfish.
I would have thought something more royal, but all right. You know
So
what
in
I'm gonna
fairness,
do because I'm magnanimous. I am not
yeah.
going to call you out for having named the super horse that did not pop up in Supergirl with the wrong name.
Okay, so my bad. Apparently, I called the super horse Streaky when it's actually Comet. I think that's a very forgivable mistake, though. I mean, yours is really bad. Mine, I think anybody could have made that.
Well, so I have to ask because you know
Yeah,
this shit.
yeah.
What is Streaky actually a thing? Is that like a different super
Yeah.
animal?
So Supergirl traditionally has a super cat named Streaky. There's also a monkey in the super pets. I call it, I think it's Blippo is the super monkey, I think.
Oh,
And then
sure.
there's Comet, the super horse. So, yeah, but I don't know. Again, I think mine is forgivable. I think yours was pretty boneheaded. But it does bring up the question. I did look into this. I was like, in the comic Woman of Tomorrow, why is Crypto Supergirl's pet versus Streaky the super cat? Because that is traditionally her pet in the comics, not the dog. And I didn't find a good answer. So,
Yeah. Well, and if were I to have been a person that only watches the movies and doesn't read the comics, my assumption would have been that that was a change they made for the movie because Crypto had already been introduced and segued
exactly.
in. But you're saying like within the confines of the comic story, that's the way it is too, right?
Yeah, apparently. So, I mean, yes, but it never occurred to me until, we were talking about super vets that I was like, oh, wait a minute. She has a cat. Why is Crypto in peril and not her cat who is named Streaky, not the horse? So,
So in the comics, though, are they all? Do they both own all of them? Are they split up amongst the family? Like, how does that work exactly? There's a bunch of pets. It sounds like.
yeah, I mean, Crypto has always been Superman's dog. I mean, he grew up with Crypto. Like anytime like Superboy has been part of the mythology, he's had a pet dog named Crypto. Yeah, so that's sort of a newer take on it where he belongs to Supergirl. So
Interesting. So
yeah,
technically, that's a piece of Superman lore that changed to
yeah,
match Woman of Tomorrow, the graphic novel, because she was the owner of Crypto in that. So that's interesting.
yeah. Cool. Why don't we talk about Supergirl? I mean, the movie came out a couple weeks ago. I think we've both read a lot and seen a lot of reactions, and I
Yeah.
will say your initial reaction when you texted me, you saw it about a week before I did. I took a while to get around to seeing it, and I think your initial reaction was, I wish I could say it was a great movie. It's not. I don't know if you want to expand on your initial reactions to the movie.
Yeah, well, I mean that's pretty close to what I said. I mean, I think I had some details about specific things in the movie, but ultimately it was not even like it wasn't a feeling of me hating the movie at all. It
Yeah.
was disappointment at the expectation that it could have been something greater for numerous reasons. The first being I had not read the graphic novel, you had, but you spoke very
Hmm.
highly of it. And but I also knew what it was based on, which is to some degree the graphic novel is based on True Grit, which I love. I loved the adaptation the Coen Brothers did. I think the book is great, although I haven't read it in years. But it's a fantastic story, and so it felt like the bones were there for a really phenomenal piece of work. And for me, it was less like this is a bad movie and more like this was a missed opportunity. I think.
I definitely thought the movie was going to be a lot worse than it was going to be. I ended up having an okay time with it. By the end of the movie, I was like, I'm pretty iffy on this. Usually, my kind of barometer for how much I like it is, am I going to watch it again? And there are plenty of Marvel movies that I've watched 2 or 3 times because, I'm doing a marathon or whatever. But other than that, I probably wouldn't just choose to watch it again. And this is probably more in that category where I'm going to watch it again if I'm, kind of doing a DC, marathon. But other than that, it didn't really feel like the kind of movie I would revisit time and again. And that's primarily just because of, again, the second half of the movie. I'd say that, like, for about a good 30, 45 minutes, I was okay with the changes made to the comic. I could roll with it. And then it just didn't really add up to the kind of movie that I'm, like, wanting to spend a bunch of time with.
Yeah. Well, I think I may have even said when we were talking about it, when I first told you what I thought, that I was like, I feel like there's an hour of good story in here in an hour and 47 minutes of movie or something, somewhere in that ballpark. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe there's 47 minutes of good movie and an hour extra. The way that the film was constructed did not work for me, just in terms of, I think you even said, like, the when I told you the thing about her, like, continually losing her superpowers, it
Yeah.
wasn't like it was just a one story where she was on a place where she had no powers. The movie worked, I want to say, at least 3 times, maybe 4 different times, to find a reason why she would not have powers anymore. It was like
Right.
the red sun, and then there was the green sun. They were on the planet. Then she got shot with the kryptonite dart, and, like,
Right.
there were all these things that, like, every time you would think you were getting the character that you were supposedly promised by the title, they would find a reason why it wasn't that. And it wasn't even so much that wasn't a good hook. It was that, like, this movie was working so hard to be an origin story that was not an origin story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she didn't get her powers in this movie, but it acted as a movie as if she didn't have powers up until that final
Yeah.
act where they kicked in. You know what I mean?
I think that brings up a good thing that you kind of referenced over text when you're talking about the difference between James Gunn's kind of approach to this material. Like, if you think about it, like, I didn't think about it till you just mentioned it, but in Superman, I mean, he is, actively in peril lots of times during that movie. He's either captured or he loses, like, he gets beat up a lot. But you
Yep.
don't feel like he's a character who's, like, continually losing powers and then finally at the end gets them back. I mean, I think the balance of how that's executed in Superman is just more definitely done. So yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, their way of doing it in Supergirl just kind of left a lot to be desired, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually something interesting that you point out, that it didn't occur to me, which is maybe there is an inherited awareness of Superman as being
Hmm.
such a strong, powerful character, that you can do that to a character that already has that level of iconography, because you know what the distance to the top is. But most people, aside from knowing that Supergirl is in some way probably from Krypton and maybe has powers similar to Superman, there's not as much of a, like, universal knowledge of her and her
Hmm.
backstory and all that kind of stuff. So I wonder if starting in a place where A, she already had her powers, and B, they were constantly being taken away, made it more confusing to be able to understand who this character was that we're essentially just seeing for the first time, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that touches on something that I've been kind of curious about, just when it comes to outside of the movie itself, just the decision to make this movie and the larger DC project. For me, like, on paper, it makes a ton of sense for this to be the second DC movie because it has, like, this natural jumping off point from from Superman, can naturally lead into Man of Tomorrow. Like, there's just, and then, she's part of the Superman family, so, like, you would think that it makes sense just from a marketing branding perspective to have a big movie with another character from the Superman family. Yeah, so on one hand, it makes a ton of sense just on paper, and then for whatever reason just didn't pan out that way. And I don't know. I mean, is do you think it is just people's familiarity with the character, or what do you think it is?
Well, I also think for me, maybe one of the things that bumps is, like, with a superhero movie, you want, like, the same but a little bit different. Like, not
Yeah.
too far off, but, like, somewhat far off. Like, Batman is a superhero, but he's very different from Superman. Supergirl is a superhero that is not that different from Superman. Arguably, there's only one major difference between her
Yeah.
and Superman. I don't mean
Right.
attitude wise, but I mean, like, power set wise and costume wise. Like, they're not far removed. So in one way, of course, it makes sense that you would brand like that, the way the superhero comics used to. If Superman's popular, of course you're going to do a Superboy and you're going to Supergirl and all that. Within movies, I wonder if the issue is, especially now that we have shared universes, do they want, like, an amalgamation of a bunch of different things to be introduced first before you start to expand the singular family of one of them? Like, would
Yeah.
people have been happier with a Wonder Woman movie or of course they would have been happy with a Batman movie, but Batman is like the Spider-Man of the DC universe. Like no matter what
Hmm.
universe around it is working or not working, people still watch Batman. So I don't think that's as much a metric. But I do feel like if you are building a universe, each piece maybe wants you want it to feel like it's building a separate piece of the universe as opposed to feeling like it's further filling out the piece you already met in the first installment. Maybe it wouldn't have been a problem if it was like 6 or 7 movies down the row. You know what I mean? But I don't know. Just coming out of the gate, maybe like
Yeah.
a super followed by a super was not the best idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say. I think, but it does. So the very common thing that I've seen coming out of this movie, and people, just kind of like, second guessing every choice. And like the big thing I keep hearing is, oh, why did James Gunn decide to make movies about all these D-list characters? And like Clayface is coming up at the end of the year. And who gives a shit about Clayface? Why doesn't he focus on Wonder Woman and Batman? And like you just said.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I do in one sense agree that maybe there actually isn't as much of an appetite for, you know, these, lesser known heroes both on the Marvel and the DC side. But but I don't know. I don't think that just relying on the heavy hitters either is also the solution. I don't know.
No, so to be clear, I totally agree with you. My
Yeah.
thing was not that necessarily Supergirl was a lower tier character, just that she was for a follow up character to a character who is very similar was maybe
Yeah.
not the right step right out of the gate. Like honestly, like the New Gods being the second film, I would have been cool with because it's such a completely different kind of a thing. I mean, I know that's a team as opposed to an individual, but like that's an obscure team. That's an obscure
Hmm.
thing in terms of like mainstream awareness. But I would have loved that and it would have felt markedly different. You know what I mean? I think the problem with this one is that what was different was the sort of cosmic nature of it, but like
Hmm.
the central figure sort of like power set were similar enough that it felt like it's only going to do one of two things. It's either going to draw bad comparisons to a one that was better before it, or more cynically and more unfortunately correct, people are just going to go, well, girl version is not as good as guy version because you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think I honestly held out hope that this one could be a success, even if it didn't have like I don't even necessarily care about the box office and everything. I think it's like if it was just a great movie and it didn't do so good, I still feel good about the overall project of the DC universe. But yeah, I don't know. It really sucks that this one kind of came out and it wasn't like a huge success creatively. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
for me, that's the biggest miss is that it wasn't one or the other. I mean, it wasn't
right?
either.
Yeah,
Like if
yeah,
it had
yeah,
been one or the other, it had been a huge success. I mean, there are plenty of like
yeah,
truly mediocre films that have been big successes in franchises. Jurassic World being one of them, but like this one didn't get either, and it's disappointing. Although I will say, and I think we talked about this a little bit, I don't think this movie is a failure in and of itself as a film. I think it's a failure for what
hmm,
people needed for or expected for it to do. And I
yeah,
think there's an interesting conversation to be had somewhere in here about the idea that I'm trying to remember when it happened that like people stopped talking about movies as being like pretty good or
hmm,
okay. Like
yeah,
movies are either great or they're hot garbage. And I mean, obviously, there's a narrowing of nuance due to the internet and social media. But I also feel like that, I don't know, at some point, I think people forgot how bad movies used to be. Like you and I grew up at a
right,
time most of the movies in the 80s were bad films. Like,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
mean like studio stuff, like they were competent, but like back when you didn't have all of the equipment that could basically make a movie for you, if you didn't know what you were doing, it was very clear very quickly. And so there were a lot of actual bad movies. Like this is a movie that would arguably probably be like a 60 or 70 if we were grading things. You know what I mean? Like a 70 is a passing grade. It's not a great movie. It's an okay movie. I don't know. I just wonder, like some of the movies that I recommend to people the most from older generations are ones that might not have been home runs, but they were big swings, even if they were not strong. You know what I mean? Like they didn't
Yeah.
it wasn't a home run, but it was an interesting thing and they tried something and it was different. And for me, that was oftentimes enough to reward it. But I feel like because so much importance is placed on every individual project and how quickly we decide on something, the
Yeah.
opportunity for something to grow or for someone to think about it or for it to just be like, yeah, that was good. What's next? And then move on, like has disappeared because a movie costs $280 million to make or whatever. Everything's make
Yeah.
or break.
Yeah. I think that's where I kind of come down. It's like at the end of the day, I'm all for creative swings and, trying things that are out of the box. But these kind of movies have to like put butts in seats. And so unfortunately, like they do get graded on, if it was the best movie
Yeah.
ever or the worst, which is really, it's funny, like I was saying, I really when I
Well,
started
and
hearing
so
how,
sorry, I
go
don't know.
ahead. Yeah,
I was just going to say, well, this is one of the circumstances where I actually think Clayface being the second film would have been better because
maybe. Yeah,
Clayface
yeah,
is a big swing creatively. It's a horror movie, it's
right.
a body horror movie that's a comic book, but it's also what is it like $60 million or something? Like it's not a very expensive movie, so
Yeah,
it can afford to do pretty good with the audience that will likely be drawn to it. That
yeah.
would have been a smart second film. I know that it didn't work out that way, and I'm sure there were
Mhm.
other reasons why Clayface is not their leadoff hitter after Superman. But like, it would have been a smarter play if what Gunn was trying to construct is what we're talking about, which is like experiments between huge tent poles and then like more interesting quirky, character driven corners of the universe. It would have been a better example of a proof of concept, I think, for that order to come out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll circle back on people's disappointment in Supergirl because I think the opportunity was there for it to be a creative swing, like based on the source material. Um, I think that there were opportunities there for it to be just kind of a really cool epic story, and instead it ended up being sort of by the numbers in a lot of ways. And there's just a lot of fantastical elements to the comic that they could have relied on. And again, during the movie, I was okay with them omitting lots of things. I was like, oh, if I was writing it, I might make those same choices. But then by the end, when it doesn't really add up to something as epic or as cool as you kind of want, you're like, well, then maybe maybe they should have left some of those fantastical elements in. And I don't even just mean like the super horse, I mean, even though that's a big one. But like, there's just lots of elements of like fantasy and magic. Like, it isn't just a western in space in the comic. Like, there is a lot of like Krem is a really good example of a character who in the comic is like more of like a fantasy type villain, like with sort of like an Errol Flynn look. And then in this he's just kind of like a Mad Maxy type like thug. And so I don't know, I just think there were lots of opportunities where there were lots of moments in the movie where they kind of just took less interesting choices, and I would think that hurt it in the end.
Yeah, I will say though, because I think you had mentioned at the beginning that there are I think undeniable wins that came out of this movie. One of them being that Millie Acock is it Acock or Alcock? Why can I never remember that?
Yeah, I think it's Alcock, but I don't know.
Okay, so Millie Alcock, I thought she was fantastic. I thought she did a really good job. I would
Yeah.
argue that she was more game for the role than the role actually had for her in terms of the way that it
Hmm.
was on the page. I think
Yeah.
she delivered bigger than the arc that she was given. I thought she was really fantastic.
I
So I
agree. I just wanted to add to that. I also thought that I was really annoyed at the marketing of the movie, like making her seem very Peter Quill-ish. I was like, oh, okay, so she's, a dirtbag with a heart of gold, and she's got her headphones and her leather jacket and everything. And in the movie, I didn't feel like she was a Peter Quill. I thought she was, Supergirl, who obviously is rough around the edges. But yeah, I ended up being a lot happier with her portrayal and her character than I thought I was going to be going in. So yeah, I agree there.
Yeah, I think you were actually right about one of the biggest disservices that was done for this movie. Not that the movie would have been
Hmm.
necessarily better or worse without it, but the marketing campaign was kind of problematic because so much of what it was showing felt like it was talking about. It felt like a James Gunn movie that James Gunn didn't make in terms of what it was
Yeah, yeah.
focusing on. The vast cosmic expanses and the sort of the jokey material, like all of that seemed to feed into like, hey, look at the DC version of Guardians of the Galaxy kind of vibe, which the movie A is not, and B,
Hmm.
if James Gunn had made it, it might have been more like that. But I think it feels to me like someone other than James Gunn. I don't know how much decision making he has over marketing. I know they say that like marketers bow to no one, like they do what the algorithm tells them will sell something. So I don't
Yeah.
know how much control he has, but it really felt like they were leaning on the wrong things about how to sell this movie by leaning into the style of the filmmaker who was in charge of the studio but did not make this movie. And I feel like that was kind of unfair, even going in for the expectation of what you're going to get.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, it's hard to argue. I mean, maybe they were trying to, again, put butts in seats, knowing even if it doesn't reflect the actual movie, they're like, hey, this is what we got. But yeah, for me, it almost made me like not want to see the movie because I was like, I don't really need another flavor of this. And so I was pleasantly surprised that the movie wasn't like very Guardians-y for the most part, but it also, at the end of the day, wasn't like something I was like over the moon about. But I do want to talk about some of the things I specifically didn't like about the movie. So like one of them is, sorry. The lack of, so this is actually an area where this isn't from the comic. This is just something that, as a reinvention of the story, they could have done. I really was hoping to see a lot more like DC aliens in the movie. Like when they're in that bus, you see like a Thanagarian, or you see you know a Starfire species, the Tamaranians, or you know what I mean, just like little Easter eggs of like DC, or like the bus driver that Seth Rogen is playing. He's a little guy. He could have been like one of the Green Lantern, like alien species or something. I think that could have been really fun. It was a missed opportunity to me, again, because that isn't really what the comic is like. The comic isn't like Easter Egg City, but it's a movie, and I don't know, that could be kind of fun. And I don't know, I was kind of annoyed that was a little bit of a missed
Yeah, no,
opportunity.
that's a good point. It's not one that so I'll be honest, I probably would not have caught them. And the way I know I wouldn't have caught them is because I just assumed that probably was the case with the movie before talking to you
Right.
and finding out that there weren't. But yeah, I will say that, and I know that the ethos I think James Gunn went with was like he wanted DC to feel more like individual graphic novels as opposed to like
Hmm.
one giant overarching story, which that's totally fine, but I don't think that affects what you're talking about, which is like, we're not saying have cameos from characters. You're saying, show me that this world is interconnected with the other worlds that exist within this place by just showing
Yeah.
us other races that also exist here.
Yeah, I think it's similar to how Superman is just kind of like wall to wall, either characters or like there's all those corporation names, or just like the movie, like from beginning to end is like a deep dive into the DC universe, and this one isn't as much. The one area that I think that they tried to do a little bit of that in was including the character Lobo. So I mean, he isn't in the graphic novel. There, maybe that was their attempt to be like, hey, let's throw a little bit more of the DC universe in here. Let's throw in a recognizable character in Lobo. I think they could have done a lot more than just having that one character in there. Who I don't know. Maybe let's talk about Lobo. Now, what did you think about Jason Momoa's turn as Lobo?
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this by saying I like Jason Momoa a lot. Frankly, I normally like Jason Momoa more than I like almost anything Jason Momoa is in.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's just that the stuff that he picks or the stuff he's offered that doesn't tend to be mostly my speed. I liked him a lot in Game of Thrones. He was obviously I thought he was fine for Aquaman, but I just didn't think that I
yeah,
didn't particularly like the idea of the Aquaman they designed for that universe. In this case, he is absolutely the perfect physical embodiment of Lobo. I think my problem with this, and it's not even a problem because it makes sense for the confines of the movie, but like from what I know of Lobo, this just felt very sort of like, I don't know. Is that all? Is that all we get of Lobo? Is that all we're going to get? And it's not a fair assessment because it's someone else's movie that he has a small role in, and I get that. I think it's just because he's such a larger than life character. I either would have liked to have way less of him, or for him to have been more integral, even in a comedic character way than he was, only because of what I know of the character. So it was almost that weird thing where it was like a little bit longer than it should have been if it was just a quick cameo to let us know he exists in this universe,
yeah,
versus like if he's going to be on that much screen time, can he have something more substantial to do than what he has been given? Was kind of where I landed. He was fine. I thought he did good with the role. It just felt like, I
yeah.
don't know, and maybe because it did not have a place in that original story, that it felt placed in there.
Yeah, I read one interview with the screenwriter so she said from her perspective, she was told when she was hired to adapt it that James Gunn asked, hey, let's fit Lobo into this story. And in her quote was, well, that's great because if we are basing this on True Grit, he can take the place of Matt Damon's character from the Cohen adaptation. But he's actually like a big part of the story in True Grit versus like Lobo's inclusion in this, where he just kind of pops in midway through and then a couple of times after that. I thought if you are going to include him like you did, like Matt Damon's character in True Grit, have him there from the beginning. And I think maybe the fear was that would take away from Ruthie and Supergirl's relationship. But I just thought when Ruthie walks into that bar at the very beginning of the movie, he should be one of the bounty hunters who's in the bar, hears what she has
Mm-hmm.
to say. Maybe he's also going after Krem. I thought it was really weird that he is going after one of Krem's sidekicks, but not him.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like,
One of his underlings. Yeah.
yeah, like Supergirl has that fight with that random alien outside. Like that could be a fight with Lobo to like have them be antagonists from the beginning, and then maybe they go their separate ways, but they're on the same hunt. Or I don't know. I just think that there was a way to actually include him that didn't just feel like,
100%.
yeah,
I think a good comparison is in Superman. James Gunn understood that Superman was a strong character and didn't feel like he needed to protect him and make him be the lead and not lose anything else. So you could have a supporting character like Mr. Terrific, who
Hmm.
absolutely steals every scene that he's in and is phenomenal. He's such a great role. And it almost felt like there was like some trepidation or something where they wouldn't want to let Lobo have that amount of space in the movie because they felt that he would run away with it.
Yeah.
And the thing is like that's not necessarily a problem for the individual scenes. Like I said, Terrific has one of the great set pieces of Superman. The sequence, where was it 5 Years Gone? Is that what it's called? The musical sequence where he's using the spheres to knock the guys out. That's a phenomenal sequence, and of course he stole that sequence, but that was built for him. If you're going to
Yeah.
put him in there, give him a reason to be there, and that's kind of I think what I meant by Lobo. Is like it was nice to see Lobo in that sort of like Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV from Once Upon a Time in
Yeah.
LA, but to only notice that he was there, but then not really feel his presence, his character's presence in any concrete way was for me was like, well, then I don't know why we had him. Again, not a bad performance.
Yeah.
Uh, he did what was asked of him, and I thought he did fine. It just like I just don't know why
Yeah.
he's here.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, it does call to mind to me, and I am curious about your perspective on this because out of the two of us, you're a James Gunn fan. It sounds like there were a few things that from articles and interviews with the director and a screenwriter that seemed like they were James Gunn additions. So one of them was include Lobo in the movie. The other one was the ending of the movie, which is where Supergirl, unlike in the comic book, they do kill Krem in the story. So we get that moment of darkness from Supergirl that, is a differentiator between her and Superman, which I think, is an interesting, way to go. I don't think it was executed really well in this movie at all. Like, I'm not opposed to the idea of a hero like killing a villain. But the execution in this to me was left a lot to be desired. I didn't really love it. But apparently, again, back to the interviews, like apparently that was something that Gunn felt really strongly that he wanted the story to end that way. I don't know. I think there were certain things as far as like just from the beginning when the movie was being conceptualized that to me were like a little bit wrong-footed. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree. Well, so this is where I struggle with the idea that I think I told you what that
Mhm.
idea that I had before, where it was like when someone is very good at a thing, if they're naturally very good at a thing, they can sometimes not be very good at teaching someone else how to do that thing or guiding
Yeah.
someone else to do that thing because they never had to learn it exactly. Like if there's something, it sounds douchey to say, but like if you have natural talent at a thing, you're not as good at teaching someone else how to do that thing if they have to learn it because you didn't have to. And
Right.
so I think here's what I think. I understand why James Gunn would have wanted that ending because the thing that I think about that ending, the idea that she being the one to kill this guy is for me what it's saying, and it honestly justifies the reason that we had any of the flashbacks to Krypton, is that she's carrying the massive weight of the death of all of the people around her, right? And holding that level of guilt and responsibility for it. And she doesn't want this girl to have that responsibility. So rather than say, this man shouldn't die, she tells that girl, you shouldn't kill her. You shouldn't kill him, but I'm going to do it because it's not going to do any more damage to me than what has already been done to me. So I'm going to do the thing that will make the world a better place because of the debt I'm already carrying around and how it won't have a greater impact on me than it would on you and what it will do to you because I don't want you to be in my position. I totally get that. I agree that it wasn't landed properly. I do feel like if James Gunn had done it, that might have been clearer. And I feel the same way about Lobo. He wanted to put a Lobo in the movie because he probably knew exactly what he would do with Lobo. And this ultimately probably wasn't what he would have done with Lobo. But I think if James Gunn has a weakness for me, it's that probably he's not as good a shepherd as he is a filmmaker. Like he may not be as good at guiding other people's hand to get the best work out of them as he is about getting the best work out of himself. Mostly because he doesn't have a traditional, like he was a punk rock musician and then he worked at Troma before he got, like, he's very unconventional in his journey. And all of it was sort of like instinctual and muscle memory, the way that he learned. So I can understand him not necessarily being very good at communicating how to do what he does effectively to someone else. Now, that's not to forgive him. Like he's in charge of a studio. That is his job now. But I feel
Right.
like that does feel to me like that was the missing piece here.
Yeah. And as much as like I'm not as much of a James Gunn fan as you are, there is that part of me that thinks, yeah, if that's the ending that he wanted, there's a part of me that thinks he could have executed that ending in a heartbreaking way or like just a memorable way. The way it is in the movie, like it really does just kind of look like she just like killed a dude.
Yeah.
And then like the very like next scene is like, okay, you guys want to like finish out my birthday party? Like it's like there's like no weight to it at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. There's some
In the
borderline
in,
sociopathic tendencies there to like murdering someone
yeah,
and then being like, all right, let's get back to
it's
the
not
party.
great, you know, and I'm just like, okay. And then I feel like this has gotten more attention than almost anything else in the movie. But again, kind of along the lines of the ending of the movie and something that James Gunn had an influence in is like that song that plays over the last battle montage of it's a Jimmy Eat World song, but it's an instrumental. I mean, it's a not instrumental, but like a cover of a Jimmy Eat World song. It has this tone that's very like wistful and it's obviously a pop song and the tonal mismatch is like something that a lot of people just like walked out of the theater saying worst needle drop ever. I actually had the experience of seeing the singer of that song on Instagram before I saw the movie posting, "Hey everybody, I know a lot of people have strong opinions about this, but for those of you who have reached out and said they loved it, thank you." Like, and it made me feel bad for this girl. So then when it happened in the movie, I was like, this is kind of cringy, but I don't hate it. And there have been worse needle drops. I don't know. For some reason, like a lot of things, like seeing over and over again, worst needle drop ever. I ended up forgiving it a lot more than I probably would have if I hadn't like seen this Instagram reel from the singer. But I don't know. Did you have a reaction to that at all, or was this something you didn't care about at all?
No, I'll be honest. I don't actually remember the Neil. So here's the thing. I think I may have
Yeah,
told you this before. I'm bad
yeah,
when it
yeah,
comes to music, both lyrical music and
yeah,
also
yeah, yeah.
just like instrumental. Like I have, like it took me seeing the Avengers movies like 9 times before I could discern that there was a theme for the Avengers. Like that's how bad my ear is for stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons I make found footage movies because I don't need a score. So I can't really weigh in on that, but I did want to just verify what you were saying. So that needle drop, was that one that was chosen by James Gunn, or was that the one that Gillespie and him fought about, and James Gunn had a different
Yeah.
choice he wanted?
So to back up, so in an initial interview after the movie came out, there was an interview with Gillespie and Anna Nagara. They talked about that scene. In that interview, Gillespie said that they were choosing among like 45 different songs and then ultimately landed on that one. And in that interview, he said that Gunn pushed for that song. In later articles that have come out, that were a little bit more behind the scenes, they got a little bit more specific and said that it came down to either doing a version of Cyndi Lauper's "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" or this song. And I mean, I guess the word is that Gunn chose one over the other. Again, that's such a silly thing to me because I don't think either song would have like made the scene. To me, my thing is more just like playing a pop song in this moment probably wasn't the best choice. And to what you were saying about maybe sometimes not noticing the music as much. Like I am a little bit more attuned to it, but like I even thought during the end credits when they were playing the Supergirl theme, I was like, oh, this feels like the first time I'm hearing her theme, you know,
Hmm.
her, and
Yeah.
because the rest of the movie was mostly just like, pop songs, which, and ironically enough, there are a lot of songs that I actually like. So I didn't have a problem with them, but it did. I don't know that
Well,
moment at the end where she's fighting all these guys and is playing this song. Like I actually think the song in Captain Marvel when she's fighting everybody and is playing No Doubt is way worse. But people
than
have
just a
like a
girl. Yeah.
huge reaction to this one. But I mean,
Well,
whatever.
so I was going to say, well, I agree with you. Probably I mean, this song didn't make enough of an impact on me that I could weigh in on it. But what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would say is that I think Girls Just Want to Have Fun is not right, not the right song for the scene. Like the tone of that wouldn't work. But I do think there's something interesting there, which is that it feels like maybe James Gunn took a step backwards, I think, in his evolution, because one of the things I thought was cool about Superman was that
yeah. I agree.
there were no needle drops for Superman specifically. There was the Mr.
Mm,
Terrific sequence,
yeah,
but by and large, aside from that, and then the I'm a punk rocker right at the
at the
very
very
end,
end. Yeah, yeah.
most of the rest of it was orchestral, and I thought
Mhm.
used to very good effect. Now, in fairness, there is a very famous Superman theme that they got to play off of. So,
Well, how would you have felt if they had used John Williams' Superman theme in this movie? Because I had that thought.
do you mean like with a minor key to let us know that it's not Superman?
I mean, it's funny because like they're using the shield, like the poster is the S shield.
Yeah.
It's very like coded, like, hey, she's a Kryptonian, she's like just as powerful as Superman. She is a big deal superhero. There's a part of me that's like, I wonder if they could have gotten away with just using the John Williams theme for her as well. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that would have been controversial, but But
Yeah,
in
I
those
mean,
kind of big moments, like maybe it would have helped. I don't know.
I mean, listen, I of course I would always go for it because that's an amazing score. I am a little surprised that when they revisited Krypton, they wouldn't have wanted to like empty the
Yeah,
John Williams Krypton bag from the opening. I mean, at the very least, utilize that
yeah,
stuff. Nobody's going to get as mad at you. Like it's literally the
mm,
L family. You know what I mean? So like this is
yeah,
his brother. You can use Jor El's stuff here. You know,
yeah,
or I mean Kal El. Sorry,
yeah. No, I think that could have been
but
cool. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, these are like lots of nitpicks. Like, I don't think this would have like affected box office. It just would have made a movie that I would have like liked more and wanted to see multiple times. And as it is, like I said, it's probably a movie I'll probably watch again a couple years from now, but not like when it comes out on VOD. I don't know.
yeah, and I think if I'm being honest, and I don't know how much of this is true for everybody else as well, half of what is disappointing to me about the movie, well, I would say a quarter, because the other quarter I already talked about, which is like the expectation based on source material and where it came from. But I
Yeah.
also think I was let down because I have always been such an enormous, and again, this is not fair because this is a Gillespie film, but
Mhm.
James Gunn produced it. I have always at least really liked all of James Gunn's movies. Now, I have not seen everything he's been involved in a production capacity, meaning like if he didn't
Right.
write or direct it. But I've seen all of his writing and directing stuff, and I've liked all of it. And you would assume that someone who was running a studio would have, I don't know, some level of control or influence over the way that a film comes out. And I guess this, what it was almost more sort of disappointed surprise than like outright dislike, because I guess I felt like, and maybe it's not
Yeah.
fair. He's off making a bunch of other movies and TV shows and stuff, but like I guess I just figured there was like a steadier hand from above with James Gunn, and maybe that's unfair because it would be like is he ghost directing like everybody says Spielberg was doing on Poltergeist for Toby
Right.
Hooper? But I don't know. I guess I just expected like I don't know, man. I don't know what I expected. I guess I'm just feeling let down because that was kind of maybe had
Yeah.
unfair expectations of a person
No,
who
no.
wasn't even James Gunn to deliver something on the level of what I like about his movies. I don't know.
I think it's a totally fair expectation because I was kind of in the same boat. Like I was like, this is a new DC, right? Like let's see what the new DC is like. And this felt like this specific movie kind of felt like it could have been a DC movie from the previous regime, or it could have been a Marvel movie. Like it didn't feel distinct enough to be like part of this new,
Yep.
universe, right?
Yeah. And you know what it is? It's also it's the very first non-Gun thing because he did both
Yeah.
seasons of Peacemaker, he did Creature Commandos, and he did Superman. So the very first thing that came out of the gate that wasn't his was the stumble step. And so it like I don't want to say it confirms the way I feel, but like in some way it confirms that what I liked about the new DC is what James Gunn wants to do with the new DC
Right.
himself. And
Yeah.
that's not great necessarily because there are going to be a bunch of things he's not going to do himself.
Right. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up a previous fight that we've had when it comes to James Gunn, his storytelling, his priorities, his opinions that came through in this movie. And that is there's a scene where Supergirl is on a space bus. They get attacked by some pirates. The pirates have teleportation devices and they use the teleportation to get into this action scene. They're teleporting all over the place. And as you and I have talked about before in the past, James Gunn apparently is very anti teleportation devices. And, but somehow he let them slip through in this movie. So what happened to quality control there, man? What happened? How did he let this happen?
Listen, add it to the list, right?
Add it to the
There
list.
have been a few issues on this movie about that. So, just out of curiosity, though, not having read the book, is there a
Yeah.
sequence like that in the comic?
No, and actually, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about there not being a ton of Easter eggs. Apparently, those pirates are very, very like, D grade Legion of Superheroes villains, apparently. So that is like a pull from, and actually, but even that said, I don't think that they had teleportation powers in the comics. That was something added for for this scene to just be like a cool, fun, like, oh, look, she's been around kind of thing. But yeah, apparently they are from the comics, not Woman of Tomorrow, but just like Legion of Superheroes comics, and yeah, they're living and dying all over that bus, man. Because when you get
Yeah,
teleported, you're dead.
yeah. It's a brand new person that appeared on the other end.
And
It's
she,
like
Supergirl, was
the
using the
prestige.
teleportation device, so she
It's the
died multiple
prestige all over the
times.
place, man. They're
I know.
just littered with bodies floating somewhere.
I mean,
No, that's
I
it's very funny that you say that because I thought, oh, there must be a bunch of cameos by DC characters that I've just missed in
yeah,
this bus. And at first you told me no, there were none, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know. And then you were like, oh, by the way, actually, there are some characters like, oh, I didn't know that either. So in every
yeah.
capacity, it's possible to have missed it. I missed it.
I'm heartened by the fact that okay, if he let these teleportation devices slide, maybe he's gonna let time travel slide because Booster Gold is coming in a few years, hopefully, and you can't do Booster Gold without time travel. And so, even though he's against time travel, you got to have it for at least Booster Gold.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder if it's more like a he doesn't want to use it because
Yeah.
he feels like it's a cheat for the way he tells stories, but he's not like like there's no zealot like a convert, like he's not out there trying to tell other people that time travel is evil. You know what I mean? Like he's just like, I'm not going to use it because it feels easy, it feels cheap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
I think he talked a lot about the idea. One of the things that would frustrated him in the after Endgame, was it after Endgame? Yeah,
yeah,
when the whole thing that happened with Gamora, where
yeah.
like they did a thing and then they thought it was fine because they just brought her a different version of her back to life, and he was like, that's I don't agree with that. That's not the same thing.
Right.
That has completely changed the world and the characters in a way that you think is like your comic book logic hasn't fixed the whole you created. And so in some
Hmm.
way I understand what he's saying, because it's like, stop messing with my shit, stop playing with my toys. But I don't know that he would necessarily be like, I don't want anybody to do it. I'm just saying, like, I get to be in charge of what
Yeah.
I do with mine.
No, I hear you. But at the same time, like maybe that is where you and I agree, where it's like, maybe what's missing is the stronger hand from, kind of a authorial voice over the whole universe of like saying, hey, maybe this is like how we want it to be. But so I don't know. I would like to transition to just talking about the DCU going forward, because I think I've seen a lot of like very reactionary things. Again, like I said, there have been the people who've said, only focus on the big characters. I'm trying to think of other fire Anna Noguera from like Wonder Woman and Teen Titans and everything because she's a terrible script writer. I've seen that a lot. I don't know. Again, those all feel very reactionary to me, but I am curious from you, like if there were going to be changes to stuff going forward, do you see any, or do you just think like, hey, this was a misstep, but keep going the way we're going, or like, I don't know, how do you feel about it?
Well, I would say we're in a position where thankfully the can has been kicked far enough down the road. I feel like that
Yeah,
what is on the horizon, Clayface is set, it's coming. But it was
yeah, yeah.
also a markedly different thing, and therefore I don't think it's going to be held to the same standard. The next movie after that is James Gunn back behind the camera doing another Superman movie. So, in at least in those respects, I think there's completely different rules for Clayface, and the same set of rules for Man of Tomorrow that there was for Superman, by which I would say that he passed by most metrics. So most of what we have to worry about would be anything that comes after that. I don't feel like there's any, like, I don't think James Gunn is sweating what he has to change about Man of Tomorrow based on the way that
Yeah, yeah.
Supergirl just performed. But after that, I can see there being some concern about, and it depends on where it's coming from, within or without. I think probably there are conversations happening with Safran and Gunn that are different than what are coming from the money people, because
Hmm.
money people tend to make decisions based out of fear, and those are usually stupid decisions. One of them would probably be, you can't make another movie headlined by just a woman unless it's either Wonder Woman or there's also a dude in there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And so who knows? Maybe I still think I agree with you. I still think we're going to get a Wonder Woman. I do now wonder if that's going to be the next one that gets greenlit.
Yeah, I don't
If
know.
that's the next one that gets announced, I don't know. I would not be surprised to find out that there is stuff that's going to be introduced in Man of Tomorrow that might be a bigger head nod towards what the next thing actually is going to be. I don't think he can
Hmm.
hold off until Man of Tomorrow comes out to announce something, but I think it's very possible that he's seeding a thing in that we haven't heard about yet that is going to be a bigger announcement. I know there have been rumors about Martian Manhunter. I don't think he's going to make a Martian Manhunter solo film, but I do think if we're meeting him, we might be meeting other characters, and there might be some sort of like ancillary or proto Justice League type situation happening. I feel like I have to imagine he's got pressure behind him at this point to start bringing people together in something. Like, I know his
Like an
instinct was not
ensemble
to like
movie is
make
what
a
you mean?
yeah, exactly, an ensemble of some
Yeah, yeah,
sort. Which I think they've teased a little bit. They teased at the opening of Peacemaker when they did the rejiggered, like the characters that
yeah.
were standing there for. So I think they've hinted at it, but I think there might be. I think, how would I say this? A proviso from on high might have come down to James Gunn to say, "Listen, can we speed this up a little bit?"
That could be the case. I don't know. I mean, so I'll tell you how I feel about it, because over the last week, I've been texting you about my feelings on Marvel and how I kind of feel like they're in a, if let's say superhero fatigue is real, and let's say that the box office for superhero movies isn't ever going to reach, Endgame heights again, like the height of the Marvel boom, like let's say that was in the past and this is not coming back. Maybe that's true, maybe that isn't. But the reaction to X-Men 97 this week, and every time X-Men are a part of the Doomsday marketing, I feel like there's just like a lot of excitement and energy around X-Men, and potentially Sadie Sink being Jean Grey in Spider-Man Brand New Day is another component of that. I just really feel like, okay, we probably won't get endgame level hype and excitement again, but it's really kind of hard to bet against mutants in the MCU. And I feel like they have like a good decade worth of stories that they could do just with X-Men and Marvel. So there's a part of me that feels like, hey, they're probably going to be okay. And then when I think about DC, there's a part of me that is like, you know what? Like, as much as I'm a DC fan of the comics and the characters and the cartoons and everything, like I feel like I'm pretty high up on these characters. I think that they're not Marvel level, like the level of excitement of these characters.
Yep.
They're more like Star Trek level, like there are people who go to conventions and who are diehard, fans of these characters, but they're a little bit more niche. So there's a part of me that thinks that there really isn't like a $1 billion Justice League movie that's possible out there, or we all know that the first Wonder Woman movie made $1 billion, but or at least up there. I don't know that a second one would, or I mean, a third one, a new Wonder Woman movie would be like a huge box office. I don't know that that's in the cards for DC characters and storylines. As much as I love them, I don't know that there is that broad
Mm-hmm.
appeal. And so that's a really long way of saying I kind of hope he keeps doing the smaller, weirder characters, and maybe just kind of rethink the approach to them. Because I think that could be a lot of fun, and it could be a differentiator between what Marvel is doing. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't run movie studios. I'm basically saying, hey, settle for smaller. But that could be a lot more fun and more creative, because at the end of the day, I just don't know that DC characters have that type of pull as what's coming from Marvel. I don't know.
Yeah. No, but you bring up something interesting, and I think there's a corollary for it on television, particularly with Game of Thrones right now,
Yeah.
which is they've been spending a huge amount of money producing House of the Dragon as the sequel to the Game of Thrones series, which is
Hmm.
arguably no, I think more expensive than the original Game of Thrones was per season. It's
Yeah.
an insanely expensive show. The Game of Thrones is very popular. It is not that much money popular, and so this last year they did A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which is infinitely cheaper. It basically
Yeah.
shot in one giant field. There were no dragons and shit like that. It was mostly just like dudes and intrigue and some interesting weird comedy and stuff like that. And it was phenomenal. It was not only super well received, it was like one of the highest rated premieres on HBO in recent years. And in a way, for me, it completely revitalized my interest in Westeros as a storytelling device. I don't dislike House of the Dragon. I think it's good. I don't like, you do that thing where you're like, this is a shake. This is a good shake. I don't know if it's a $20 good shake. It's a good shake.
Hmm.
Like when I watch House of the Dragons, I don't know, is it good enough for how much they spent on it? But Night of the Seven Kingdoms is an affordable show that is a very interesting, unique niche of Westeros that I care about and I'm interested in, I'm invested in, and it costs them way the hell less. Is
Yeah.
there a way for James Gunn to model something similar where you'd be like, could you make two $80 million superhero movies about weirdos that don't
Yeah.
have to break the friggin' bank in order for it to be considered a success for Warner Brothers, and then create what would be considered a sustainable model for superhero movies moving forward? Let
Yeah.
Marvel contend with having to make $1 billion every time out of the gate. If we can successfully clear $400 million profit off of a movie, we're done. We've made
Right.
we've made our film a success. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I also think that I looked this up because I was really curious about the budgets of something like Supergirl and Superman compared to something like Dune. Or the other movie I thought of was Wicked, because like that was another movie that was like a big spectacle,
Yep.
Hollywood blockbuster that wasn't a superhero movie. They all have comparable budgets, and Wicked kind of looks like not a great movie when it comes to like its effects, or but it was, I don't know. Dune is probably a better example of a movie where I'm like, okay, comparable budget, way more ambitious in its storytelling and production, like, the way they filmed that movie. There's a part of me that, like, what was really, circling back to Supergirl, like there was a part of me that wishes that it really was felt more like a graphic novel, like distinct from, anything else. Like I almost wish it didn't have the bookend at the end where she's back on Metropolis with Superman. Like I almost felt like I would have preferred if it didn't have to take place in between Superman and Man of Tomorrow. Like if it could just be like a Supergirl adventure that happens in the world and has its own distinct look, and you know what I mean. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of me that is like, you really could have done a Dune style like epic with this character. And, maybe it wouldn't have been a huge box office hit, but like would have been a very distinct, story. And I think that is ultimately the failing. And I think is that they ended up not delivering on that, right?
Right. Well, and then in that case, if it is a standalone, it becomes a thing that people can go back and watch because they enjoy, and not, to
Right.
your point, the only time you're going to revisit it is because it's a piece in a larger mosaic that you have to see in order to, complete a journey. Yeah, I don't know, man. I do think though there might be it's interesting to me because I don't know anybody who's more interested in the meta narrative of storytelling in a comic book form, or superheroes in comic books and screens, than you. And the fact that you would be like, I would love to have a standalone thing again, is very interesting to me because I felt like that for a long time. Like I have a good friend of mine, my co-filmmaker friend, who doesn't even watch Marvel stuff anymore because he's like, I got off the train at one point and I just can't get back on. It's too
Yeah.
much shit. I can't keep track of it all. And even though they've started to self-correct, like in the sense of like the TV stuff doesn't have to tie in anymore, it can just be its own thing. It still feels like an enormous amount of stuff. And I think the what worked for a long time, which was the serialized nature of these movies, one feeding into another in a way that keeps you coming back, has also become its biggest disadvantage because you now have to continually top the last thing that you did, which was enormous enough to bring everybody together. If they
Yeah.
all have to keep feeling like that, you're eventually going to make something so big that it you can't even get your head around it anymore. You know what I mean? It becomes so large that it exists outside of its own ability to exist. I don't know. It's too
Well,
too big to
yeah.
fail.
Well, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I think that Marvel like didn't set out to make the Infinity Saga. That was something that was an accident. But I can tell you, like from my earliest days as a comic book reader, I remember being in junior high and only having read a few comics. Like I wasn't even that deep into it, but overhearing a kid in the lunchroom talking about Infinity Gauntlet, the comic book, and talking about the moment where Thanos like breaks Captain America's shield, and like it was like this, oh my god, and then he did this, and then he did that, and so like that's a story that has been like static in my head for like more than 20 years. So of course when they put it up on screen, it was a big moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so likewise, like, yeah, if 10 years down the road, Marvel comes out with an Age of Apocalypse movie, that's going to be a huge deal. And people are going to like run out and see it. And it's going to make $3 billion, right? It's going to be like the biggest movie ever because it's part of like a much bigger like nerd, and actually not even just nerd, but just like kind of like there's a lot of people who don't self-identify as nerds, but who know of Age of Apocalypse because they love X-Men, because they watch the cartoon or whatever, right?
Do you?
And
So that's
yeah, go
But
ahead.
that's a really good point, and I wanted to ask you about though, which is, do you feel like we can only ever go back to stuff from a certain point and back to do that with? Because haven't
Hmm.
we, in some way, kind of like shattered the monoculture to the degree that that's not really a like there aren't like I don't know what you
Hmm.
call it, like whispers in the schoolyard about a story that everybody knows now because there's so many stories and so many places to get them. Like
I
Absolute
think,
Batman or the
yeah.
Absolute series is probably the most recent huge phenomenon. And even that, like, there's a ton of people I know that love Batman that don't know what the hell Absolute Batman even is.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. Is there an ability to have a monocultural element thing that is so popular that if you did translate that into a movie, that
Yeah.
would have the impact that like an Infinity War that's been around for 25 years has?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question because that's what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to comic books, I think there are a lot fewer than we thought. Like, I think that because of the Marvel boom, we thought, oh, there's all of these stories out there that people love and they can't wait to see them adapted. And then it turns out some people couldn't wait to see them adapted, but not like millions of people, I think that
Right.
was sort of
Yeah.
like
Like,
a,
yeah.
yeah,
Who's going to run out to see DC's? What was the one where Gotham was destroyed by an earthquake? No
right,
Man's Land.
Cataclysm or something. Yeah,
I
No
mean,
Man's Land. Yeah, yeah,
I would love to see No Man's Land.
right,
I thought Greg Rucka did a great job, but like, who? Nobody's going to make a 7 movie crossover about an
right.
earthquake that disrupted Gotham. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's kind of what I was saying about DC in general. Like, I think that this has been sort of like I think that, good or bad, I think a lot of the DC EU movies, like, were helped by the Marvel boom. Like, movies like Aquaman that probably weren't going to be like a huge hit ended up being a huge hit just because of where they landed in the calendar that year and because, people were just really into superhero movies. I think it kind of gave this false impression that DC movies or DC characters in comics were as, I don't know, as cool as Marvel, and I don't think they are. As and speaking as somebody who loves DC, like I just think that. Well, okay, this is the last thing I wanted to say because I know we should probably wrap up at a certain point because this does feed into like what I am curious about what you think the direction forward should be. I do think that the reason, like because DC characters aren't as popular or well known, or I mean, I think the approach has often been let's make them gritty, because you can do kind of like the corny guys in capes, blah blah blah, and with DC in particular, like they have found success over the years in like, hey, let's do like a really grown up version of these guys in capes or whatever. And that's my biggest fear is that like that's what the Snyderverse was. I mean, there are elements of darkness in James Gunn stuff, but I still think he kind of keeps, that Silver Age tone that we've talked about. I don't know. There's a part of me that is like, I just hope they don't like just try the same thing over and over again and like, oh, let's just make a gritty version of DC Universe to get, the cool kids to like, check out these movies. I don't know.
So I will say this: if as long as James Gunn is able to continue his tenure, I
Hmm.
feel like learning that the Gorilla Grodd and Jimmy Olsen
Yeah.
show is happening, that they're in early development on a Mr. Terrific show, that Man of Tomorrow is happening, to a lesser degree Clayface, but those point me towards it feels very much like he wants to do the Silver Age on
Yeah.
screen. And I feel like this is the era for the Silver Age in a couple of ways. I don't know if you remember, but the Silver Age of comics was also not as popular as the Golden Age or Modern Age of comics. Like it was a
Right.
weird middle time before comics became super popular again in the modern, like the Image era, you know what I mean? So like that Silver Age era is kind of where movies are now, which is people are still watching them. Yes, they're not watching like they were watching them before, so we got to figure out something else interesting to do with them and maybe find a new way to tell the stories so that people are,
Yeah.
maybe we got to put a dog in it, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Like they were sort of just throwing shit at the wall during the Silver Age to see what would stick. So there's something I like about that, because it feels like the era that he's attached to matches the moment in the era for filmmaking, whether it pans out or not, and whether or not they can make them on an affordable level to make that thing be a success moving forward is going to be, I don't know, it'll be a challenge. I think ultimately the one thing that will be interesting to see is if any of the people who are in charge, and in all likelihood this will never happen, are there any people who are running studios that recognize that making 10 movies that cost the same as one movie means you have
Hmm.
10 times as many opportunities to make money? I don't know why that math doesn't work for them. People who make horror movies understand that if you can make a movie for $175,000 as opposed to $175 million, then when it makes 30 million, that's a huge success, not a huge failure. Like that's not
Yeah.
hard to get your head around. So that, for me, that would be the smart future for DC, would be to figure out how do you make small scale stories. Like a Lobo story could be a small scale story in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Clayface is a small scale story in an interesting way. Like they can find those and they can tell those if they don't have to have two things: one, a giant epic scale to paint on, and two, a continuing narrative that feeds through every one of the things and makes them all one big culminating event. I think those are the things that are kind of preventing DC from being able to become the thing I'm describing.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that there is a path where that is where they go. And I think it really bums me out that there's probably more pull in the other direction, which is like, every movie has to be Justice League level, or every movie has to be Wonder Woman or Batman, or, and it really bums me out that that might be the side that wins because I don't know, sounds really boring to me.
Well, no, I agree with you. I mean, listen, there were horror didn't always have it under lock and key. I mean, you remember
Yeah.
what was it, the Dark Universe that was going to blow the world up, and then they made
Right.
that one movie with Tom Cruise, and it shit the bed, and then everybody's
Yeah.
like, okay, forget it, horror sucks. And then it had to be like, what was it, Lee Wanell making the like $5 million Invisible Man that was a big hit, to be like, oh yeah, I guess you can make those small and make a lot of money off of them. So
Yeah. All right. Well, Man of Tomorrow, you mentioned like a Martian Manhunter rumor that's out there. I feel like the entire DC universe might be in this movie, and if that's the case, I'm all for it. I mean, I have no issues with there being too many characters in these movies because I mean, yeah, I think that's fun. I think I like it when the movie when the universe is a little overstuffed. I think that Superman could have used more characters if I'm honest with you.
well, I was going to say, you and I were the only. I think we're in the minority, because there's so
Yeah.
many people that said that the first one felt like it was like packed, and I was
Yeah.
like, yes, that's why it was good, because it felt packed, man.
Yeah.
Like it was. I'm so tired of seeing a movie where like a superhero is born and he's the only one that lives in this town, and it's going to take 3 more movies before he meets
Yeah.
another dude that can do a thing.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm still pretty high on Man of Tomorrow. I'm still hoping that it's really good. I expect it. I mean, yeah, I'm still pretty excited for that one, and I know you are too, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. My confident prediction is that that is going to be the second movie after Supergirl to write the path for DC. I think that Clayface is going to be a sleeper hit in the respect that it's definitely going to earn a profit. It didn't cost that much money, but it's I think what people are going to be surprised by is that it's definitively going to be a very very different thing
Hmm.
that is successful. Like at what it's being, like it's going to be a body horror movie and it's going to be like a legit one. It's going to be
Yeah.
creepy and people are going to be like turned off by it. It's like a hard R, but I think it's going to be successful, surprisingly so. And then Man of Tomorrow is going to come out, and then so for me that would have been the ideal order: Superman, Clayface, Man of Tomorrow, and then other stuff. Because then you've proven you can go two different tracks, and people will
Yeah.
follow both of them. You know?
Yeah, that one's interesting because I think they changed the release date to be like on Halloween, I think, or in October. Maybe I think it was
Yeah,
like in
in
November,
October.
and
Yeah,
they moved it to October, which makes a ton of sense. So yeah, I I agree. It probably will be, at least a modest hit and hopefully more. So
yeah. Well, I look forward to forcing you to go watch a horror movie on the big screen because it's a comic book.
yeah, we'll see about that. All right, man. We'll leave it there, man. But I think yeah, we'll check back in. What's our next? I guess it'll be Spider-Man Brand New Day, right?
Yeah, yeah. Nothing else bigger than that coming anytime soon.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk again with our predictions for Spider-Man and then our reactions after that.